Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to strongly support this motion to improve rental security in the Northern Territory. I want to start by reminding all of us that we are here representing all the people of the Northern Territory. I'm not sure how many members in this chamber are renters themselves, but I can hazard a guess that it is far fewer than 50%. Go member for Goyder. But I'm sure it's far fewer than 50%, which is the number of our constituents across the Northern Territory who are renters. But I'm sure many of us grew up as renters, and we may have shared the experience of housing insecurity because of rental pressures. I remember Saturday afternoons in my childhood house where my dad counted out the 20-cent pieces at the kitchen table after he came home from his factory job to make sure we had enough money to make the rent and buy the food we needed until the next paycheck. And I know many people in my electorate who have this same experience every week. Our job in this Parliament is not only to legislate for ourselves or for those who own their own homes or other properties. It's to make good law for all Territorians, for the more than 50% who rent, for the families struggling to keep a roof over their heads, and for the broader communities that depend on stable, fair housing. It's precisely because we are entrusted to represent everyone, not just ourselves, that this motion matters. The cost of living affects every Territorian, but for renters, the pressure can be relentless. As I said, half of Territorians rent their homes, and that's reflected in my electorate of Johnston, where almost 1 in 2 households rent. These are the people who stop me in the supermarket, who call my office, and who write to me late at night because they're often desperate. Many of these households live on modest incomes, and they tell me rent increases are consistently pushing them to the edge. Over the last year, rental demand in my electorate of Johnston has risen by 124% for houses and 64% for units, pushing the median weekly rent to approximately $730 for houses and $530 for units. And these numbers aren't just numbers, they reflect parents working double shifts, students skipping meals, and seniors sacrificing essentials to keep a roof over their heads. There are difficulties too for small business owners, as noted in the Joint Select Committee on Northern Australia Workforce Development First report, which said many businesses in Northern Australia have reported that they face challenges not just filling skills shortages, but to an equal extent locating housing for the people offered positions to fill those skills shortages, whether from other parts of Australia or migrants. Whilst larger sectors like mining and government are able to offer subsidised housing, smaller businesses in particular are not. One Johnston mother of 3 told me recently she has had to move twice in 2 years, each time because her rent was raised beyond what her family could afford. Each move disrupted her kids' schooling and her work, housing insecurity that affected every single part of her life. And this doesn't affect people in Johnston, it affects people across the Territory. Just down the road in the electorates of my fellow MLAs who I know are incredibly committed to their constituents in Palmerston, rental returns are high, 5.7% for houses and 7.4% for units, while vacancy rates are extremely low at 1.23%, far below the healthy 3% level. Who's buying these properties that they're renting out? According to Real Estate Investor, mostly investors from interstate, not local residents. In fact, 6 out of every 10 homes sold in Palmerston go to buyers from outside the Territory, often before the properties even officially hit the market. These investors are chasing high returns, not contributing to our local community, and this drives rents up for all Territorians. These people don't send their kids to our schools, they don't shop at our local shops, and they don't join our sporting clubs. They take profits out of our community while pushing Territorians out of secure housing. Madam Speaker, here is the sharp reality. The Northern Territory is the outlier in Australia when it comes to renter protections. We're the only jurisdiction in the country without an independent bond board, and we still allow no grounds evictions, trailing behind Victoria, New South Wales, the ACT and South Australia. In New South Wales, tenants have an independent bond board holding over $5 billion in bonds, which protects both tenants and landlords with transparent, fast resolution of disputes. In Victoria, rent increases are capped at once every 12 months, and minimum standards for heating, cooling, safety and privacy are mandatory. In Queensland, new laws restrict rent increases to once per year and strengthen protections against unfair evictions. In the ACT, a territory with a population not unlike ours in numbers, landlords must justify rent increases above CPI, and there are strong rules against no-ground evictions. Every other jurisdiction has an independent bond board. Every other jurisdiction has tighter limits on rent increases. Every other jurisdiction enforces minimum standards for rental homes, and most other jurisdictions forbid no-grounds evictions. The Northern Territory is the only place in Australia where none of these basic protections exist. Territorians are being treated as second-class citizens compared to renters in every other state and territory. Madam Speaker, this motion proposes a series of reasonable, measured reforms to bring us in line with the rest of Australia. A 2-year rent freeze followed by a cap of 2% every 2 years is not radical. It gives families breathing room, students space to study, seniors dignity in retirement. In Johnston, a retired couple on the maximum age pension available renting a unit would have $525 a week left for bills, food and other expenses. It also stabilises our neighbourhoods, supports responsible local landlords and counters the distortion of a market tilted towards absentee investors. In 1998, a private member's bill was brought before this Parliament seeking to establish a rental bond board, and it was defeated. In 2015, there were discussions in the Northern Territory regarding the establishment of a bond board, with a discussion paper distributed by the then government, which noted back then, 10 years ago, that the NT remained the last jurisdiction in Australia not to have an independent bond board. In 2023, in a submission to a federal review, the Darwin Community Legal Service highlighted yet again that the NT remained an outlier in regard to a bond board. This is not a new idea or proposal, it simply requires action. An independent bond board would help both renters and landlords. Right now in the Northern Territory, rental bonds are still held by landlords or agents, and that system creates unnecessary tension. Tenants worry they won't get their money back, landlords worry about being out of pocket, and disputes can drag on for months. An independent board would easily fix this by holding all rental bonds securely in trust, managed impartially, and not by one side or the other. And for tenants, this means certainty that their bond is safe, separate from a landlord or agent's cash flow, fast, fair refunds when they leave a property, and clear, independent dispute resolution if disagreements arise. For landlords, it means bonds are always properly collected and stored, reducing the risk of mismanagement or error, having a central system to recover legitimate costs for damage or unpaid rent, and less time and legal costs spent in disputes because the process is streamlined, transparent and backed by law. And when we look at how the other jurisdictions do it, we can see that centralised bond management reduces conflict, protects both sides and builds trust. The impact on the health and well-being for both renters and landlords would come along with the certainty that an independent bond board provides. There's no good reason why the NT should lag behind here. Establishing a bond board here would immediately improve confidence in the rental sector, protect property values and support professional, responsible landlords while giving renters the security they deserve. And this single reform would significantly reduce stress and unfairness, especially for tenants in complex living arrangements like share houses whose bonds currently fall through legislative gaps. I also strongly support the other aspects of this motion which call for several other reforms which would strengthen our housing market while protecting Territorians. Minimum energy efficiency, heating and cooling standards which are essential in our harsh climate. The CSIRO report, A Focus on Darwin, described one of the drivers of the core social needs of those living in Darwin as being thermal comfort and an affordable cost of living. And they also state that 15% of seniors are seeking to leave the Territory due to the hot climate. We want to keep people here, and that includes renters, and renters should not suffer from unsafe or unlivable conditions, especially in our summer's peak. Summer, our dry season, wet season, hot's peak. Abolition of no-ground evictions which thrust families out without warning, destabilise children's schooling and break neighbourhood cohesion. protections against discrimination to prevent tenants being excluded based on race, on family status or on income, modernising the Act for shared house tenants, ensuring those in non-traditional living arrangements receive fair legal recognition, greater landlord accountability, mandating that property owners meet basic obligations consistently and transparently. Madam Speaker, housing is not about shelter, and we've talked about that a lot in this chamber. It goes to the core of many things that this government has said is so important to them. It goes to the territory lifestyle, it goes to keeping communities safer, it goes to building our economy. If we're serious about all of those things, then housing security must be at the centre. With half of our constituents renting, we owe it to them and to the future of the Territory to finally fix these gaps and give people stability. I don't want families in my electorate to be sitting there counting out the coins in their pocket after they've come home from working on their night shift to see whether or not they're going to be able to make the rent this week. I don't think any of us want that. Stronger renter protections mean stronger communities, safer neighbourhoods and a fairer economy, and right now the Northern Territory is falling behind every single other jurisdiction in Australia. We should not accept being the outlier, we should not accept being second best. I thank the member for Nightcliff for bringing this motion forward, and I call on every member of the Assembly to support it for our people, our communities and our future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.